So you have to opt into this, and through that, then we can access another system called IPAWS, which is the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. The funny thing about the word IPAWS is it begins with the word integrated, but it's not really very well integrated. The fact of the matter is, when you have to send messages out through the wireless alert system or through the broadcast system, you have to craft different messages for different platforms. And when the fire is moving a football field a second and you're trying to get that message out, you can imagine how ultimately difficult it is. One of the things that frustrates me the most about iPause is the WIA system, which allows us to send a message to your cell phone, even if you haven't opted in, but they limit it to 90 characters. Now they're working on, FEMA's working on expanding to 360, but they just sent out an email recently telling us that they have to, they're gonna postpone it because it's gonna take more time to figure out how to do that. But how do you communicate in 90 characters a life-threatening situation and then give people the direction that you need to give them in order to save their life when the fire is burning at a football field a second, right? That's where it comes back to you, is you guys have got to be tuned in on multiple levels and also use your own common sense. And I'll say this now and I'll say it again. If you look out your window and you see smoke and fire, you don't have to wait for the authorities to tell you to go. You're all adults, you're all smart, you can all figure this out. You can all do what you need to do, right? We also have a very, very robust social media platform, Facebook, Twitter, that we send messages out, and we've got our community tuned into that, so they listen to what we're doing. So we send messages out simultaneously through Code Red, through the iPause system, and through our social media. And then we have our, of course, our traditional media partners that we work with to try to get the message out. Now, I'm going to tell you why most all agencies have these emergency mass notification systems, the Facebook, the social media platforms, all that stuff. I'm going to tell you why they do that. Because it is the cheapest, most cost-effective way to reach lots and lots of people, right? It is the most cost-effective way to reach lots of people under ideal circumstances, okay? The most effective way to get people to evacuate, and I learned this from the Oroville Dam spillway incident. Actually, the Army Corps of Engineers sent the University of Kentucky to my office where they did a research project on what it takes to evacuate people, and here's what they found. The most effective way to evacuate people is for a law enforcement officer in a uniform to knock on your door, and when you answer the door, to tell you to get out now or you're going to die. That is the most effective way. The problem is there's not enough law enforcement officers to get where they need to go, and especially in communities like this. We have similar terrain in some respects, but you guys are much more remote in many respects. You know how it is navigating some of these narrow, winding mountain roads when maybe there's only 2 deputies on, right? Right. So there's no way for us to evacuate you, or notify you rather, in the most effective way possible because there's just not enough resources. And let's face it, there's no way Alpine County can have 100 deputies sitting around every day, all day long. You just can't afford that. I can't afford that, right? Which is why you gotta be part of the solution. Next slide, please. So, once you get people evacuated, and I have some lessons that we'll ultimately learn. Once you get people evacuated, once they're out, then you've got to secure the area. And that takes a lot of effort on the part of a lot of law enforcement, and inevitably you have people who stay behind, right? You always have the people that stay behind. I'm going to save my house. I've been through this before. I've lived here 30 years, and I've seen fire here, and I know what to do. Fantastic. I will tell you in my county, and I suspect the same, if we knock on your door and say, get out or you're going to die, and you say, oh, no, I'm good. I'm staying to fight the fire. But then we're going to go, okay, what is your dentist's name? Oh. Why do we want to know your dentist's name? hopefully then we can get your teeth and maybe identify your body later with that. Now we have DNA, and so I might know, hey, who's your next living relative, so I can get a DNA sample from them ultimately to try to recover them. We're not going to spend time with you. We're not going to arrest you. We're not going to put you in the back of a patrol car and haul you to jail, because we got other people who are going to listen, hopefully, to save. Now, here's the great thing about people who stay behind. And if you do it, and I get it, I'm a pretty independent guy. I get it, I understand. But in a situation like this, if you stay behind, who is going to take care of you? Your power is going to be out. Your water is going to be out. How are we going to get food to you? Inevitably, what happens is you become a bigger burden on public safety later on when we have to go back in and rescue you, or you're on 911 begging for a fire engine, begging for a deputy to come get you as you huddle in the bathroom with your mother and your daughter, screaming because the flames are coming. That is a real life story, folks. I did not make that up. That is the absolute God's honest truth. So if you want to stay, stay, but understand what you're doing. You're taking your own life in your hands. That's your responsibility. But remember also, you're also putting the lives of other people at risk, because if you stay too long and now you change your mind, we may not be able to get to you. Once it is evacuated, we evacuate it for good reason. We don't. This is the honest to God's truth. We do not like to evacuate people. It is a big pain in the rear end to evacuate people. We don't do it for fun. But inevitably, people get mad at us. And they come up to the roadblocks and they call us all kinds of names and they threaten us and they do all kinds of stuff and they call our dispatch and they yell at them and they scream at them. And they get mad because we have to keep them out. They go, well, the fire is out. Why can't I go back in? Well, the fire may be out, but there are power lines down everywhere. The water is down. There's still hazards that we have to deal with before we can open this up to the public. And so what I would ask that you remember that and be certainly kind to those people, because they're just doing a job. They're trying to save people. They're trying to save property. And they really, really don't need your abuse. We did a few things to try to accommodate that. We set up security escorts where we were. You got to understand, this thing lasted so long. The evacuation was on for almost 2 months. People were displaced that long. And we had to set up actually an evacuation escort. I'm going to tell you right now that I made an error, and this is for the sheriffs in the room. When I set the program up, I initially called it the Sheriff's Escort Service. Not realizing the connotation of calling it the Sheriff's Escort Service. So we had to quickly explain to people that it wasn't that kind of escort service. And instead, it was some deputies would try to take you to your home and get you what you needed. But so if you do that, call it something else, like, I don't know, come up with a different name. I'll say this as well. If you have animals, please, 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 dear God, come up with a plan for your animals ahead of time. It is absolutely tragic how many animals were lost. And you got to understand that the capacity to get in and save people's animals when we're trying to save human lives becomes very difficult. But there was some real heartbreak there. And if you've got animals, you've got to have a plan for them. Next slide, please. I want to tell you a little bit about, just to show you the scope of this, the mass of this. So when you evacuate 46,000 people from a particular area, they almost immediately become displaced and detached from their social network and all their friends and their family. And so we were faced with this monumental task of receiving literally thousands of calls from people who were trying to find their loved ones. We were overwhelmed with that. We had to stand up an entire operation. And there was one night where the list of unaccounted for people or missing people stood at 3,800. That's the number of people that we were trying to find to determine whether or not they were alive and reunite them with their family members. And one of the interesting things about this, the media descended upon us, and it was media from all over the world. And they all wanted to do one thing, which I thought was deplorable, which was they wanted to connect the number of people who were unaccounted for with the potential number of people who died. and they wanted me to speculate as to how many people I thought were dead. And I thought it was deplorable, and I would often get into fights with the media about that and tell them I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to answer those questions, it's ridiculous. Doug talked a moment ago, or when Doug was talking about the fact that, you know, we have 85, and I'll tell you more about that. But I shared the similar opinion with him, like up there. I thought there's going to be thousands of people dead by the time we're done here today. That night, when FEMA got there, FEMA told me that I should prepare for 450 to 500 dead bodies. Now, I told them that I'm not going to count dead people until they're in my possession or until I actually recovered them. And we remained optimistic, and every day we fought through that. But it is an absolute testament, ultimately, to, I think, the preparedness of our community, the preparedness of our first responders, and how we were able to do that. That the expectation was that there'd be 500 dead people, and although it is absolutely tragic, the number is only at 85. Next slide, please. So, search and recovery and identity of human remains. I have come to believe, and I'll stand on this, that we were faced with the most complex mass casualty incident to occur in the United States in modern history. I say that because of this. There are other mass casualty incidents where more people died. Airplane crashes, certainly, you can have more people die. The World Trade Center during 9/11, more people died. The difference is those incidents are generally they're generally confined to a relatively small area, right? Not 155,000 acres. And they generally are confined to either a single airplane or a structure that you know where to look for human remains. We didn't have that. We had 18,000 structures that we had to search. And in addition to that, on an airplane and even in the World Trade Center, you have an idea of who was there. On an airplane, you know who's on the airplane. And in the World Trade Center, you have an idea of who the employees were. You have an idea of who might have been doing business there. There was no way for us to know who was in these areas when this happened. We certainly knew residents were, but how many non-residents happened to be in there, right? There was no way to know that. And so ultimately, we had to use about 10,000 personnel made up of search and rescue members, urban search and rescue, firefighters, coroner's investigators, cadaver dogs, forensic anthropologists, forensic pathologists, DNA officials to go through and search 18,000 locations, and some of them we had to search twice or more. And it was a process of peeling back the debris and getting out there with screens to sift through ash to find very small pieces of bone. In some cases, in many of the cases, the remains were collected in a small shopping bag. That's what was left. We were fortunate to be able to work with a company called Andy Rapid DNA, and they've helped us immensely in terms of identifying these folks. But it is an absolutely, there's no way to explain that. And I tell you all of that because I want you to understand what it is that we're facing. And I want you to understand that you've got to be part of the solution, which is prepare yourself ahead of time, get out, do what we ask. You've got to be part of the solution. Next one. Repopulation became a monumental undertaking. As I told you, this area was evacuated for probably close to 2 months, and we had to work with the utility companies, PG&E, AT&T, Comcast, to try to get to the point where it was safe for people to return. I mean, power lines were down everywhere. The water system was down, and we would have to go through and chunk out sections to get those areas back to the point where they were marginally safe, minimally safe, just safe enough for the public to go in. And the pressure that was on us every day, people yelling and screaming at us, let us back in, let us back in, let us back in. And I understand the frustration, I get it, I do. But we're not doing that because we didn't have anything better to do. We're not doing that because it's fun. We're doing that because we're trying to keep people safe. And that's something that I think you have to understand. Next slide, please. So lessons learned. Here's what I believe. Best chance of surviving. Best chance of surviving. I want you to listen to that because I haven't said to you that I can tell you that there's a guaranteed way that you're going to survive. And I'm sorry, but it's a time that we have to be honest with our communities. We have to manage our expectations. Because if we don't, then you're lulled into a false insecurity. You come to believe that it's someone else's responsibility to keep you safe. You come to believe that it's the sheriff's responsibility to warn you, let you know what's going on, get you out. It's the fire department's responsibility to do that. It's your responsibility too. So your best chance is proper fuel management ahead of time. And what we mean by that, and I'm not a fire expert, I'm not a forester, but at some point in these areas, we have to get back to figuring out how to live compatibly with fire in our areas. We have to reintroduce fire into our landscape in the appropriate way to keep these fuels down so that you don't face what we're facing, right? And then beyond that, you have got to have defensible space. If you live in this area, you have to have defensible space. It's your responsibility for your own home, and it's your responsibility for your neighbors. Because if everybody in the neighborhood does it, but one person doesn't, they are a liability. They are a threat to the community because they haven't done that, right? In addition to that, you've got to be prepared to go ahead of time. These little go bags and things like those are great, but folks, you need to think about what it means to evacuate. And during those fire season, or high peak fire season, which is basically all year now, right? That means you're ready to go. You've got gas in your car. You've got your important papers. You've got your medication. You know where your family is. You've got ways to communicate. You have a plan for your pets. You know where you're going to go. And you grab that stuff and you go. Now, I didn't lose my house. But I've talked to a lot of people, and certainly Doug has, but the people that I have talked to, time and time again, no one has ever come up to me and said, you know, Sheriff, I wish I would have stayed a little longer and got a few more things. Those things can be replaced. But if you know what you need ahead of time, what's really important to you, have those things ready to go, and then go. Get the hell out of there. This is not a full comprehensive list. By all means, there's a lot of better lists out there. But I just can't stress enough to you, you got to be prepared. You got to be ready to go. And when the time comes to go, go. Now, I told you have to be situationally aware, because you can't rely upon all of these methods to communicate with the public getting through. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But it's incumbent upon you to be situationally aware. Pay attention to what's going on. Tune in to the various platforms used to communicate with the community. Pay attention to what's going on outside. When you see smoke, start having a plan. If it's getting close, go. And if you live with people who have mobility issues or disabilities that need more time, don't wait, right? If you stay prepared to survive on your own, if you stay prepared to survive, or not, thank you. But the bottom line is this: there's no guarantees, and it's so important for us to start being honest with ourselves. You no longer can just ignore what's going on and expect someone else to tell you what to do and then decide whether or not you're going to follow their directions, because there's a lot of people that just don't do that, right? Next slide, please. So I want to talk to you a little bit about this notification, because this is another piece that is big. And everyone, I hear this all the time, oh, I didn't get notified. As a matter of fact, I spoke to a young lady who was very upset with us. And what she said was, we didn't get the notification to leave. I said, well, how are you here right now? She said, well, I left. There was fire all around our house. It was burning. But my mom wouldn't leave because she didn't get a call from the sheriff's office telling her to leave. And she died. Now, folks, if you have to get a call from the sheriff to tell you to leave your house when your house is on fire, you're not taking responsibility for your own safety, right? You've got to be part of the solution. So what we learned is that notifying people, you have to be able to notify people across, or communicate with people across multiple platforms. Your wireless, your emergency mass notification system, your social media, your traditional media, if there's time, door-to-door notifications. One of the things that we're doing, and I didn't develop this idea, I borrowed it from our colleagues in Sonoma County and Napa County. We're installing those European-style sirens on our patrol cars. Then we're going to train our community that when you hear that siren, that means there's an evacuation and you need to pay attention to what's going on and get the heck out. Because frankly, I can drive down the road with that siren and cover more houses than getting in and out of the car and knocking on doors, right? Now let me talk to you briefly about sirens. Because I've had lots of people come on and go, Sheriff, all we need is sirens, big sirens. Put them up on the hill, big sirens. Well, let me ask you this. How many of you have lived in a coastal region? Anybody? Okay. And there were sirens, right? That said, when the siren goes off, there could be a tsunami, right? Right? And what do you do in a tsunami? You run uphill, right? So when you have a situation where you're trying to warn about one threat that has one response, tsunami.